Hey guys, as we wind down tonight, we step into a world where smiling at someone you like might earn you a whipping. A world where the idea of dating was a luxury, and for most, a dangerous one. To love someone back then was much like keeping a goldfish in the village well. Everyone could see it glimmering below, but no one dared to reach in. Perhaps you are picturing roses, handwritten love letters, and long walks beneath the moon. You may set those notions aside. You were far more likely to find yourself bargained over like a modest plot of land, subject to terms and conditions you had no voice in. Then, should you be permitted to meet, you would sit beneath the gaze of a hawk-eyed aunt whose vigilance would make even the candle in the room avert its flame out of sheer discomfort. Medieval courtship was no sun-dappled picnic. It was a battlefield of a quieter sort, where matchmakers, noble houses, the church, and whispers that travelled faster than royal messengers all fought for influence. One stray glance could unravel months of careful arrangement. One poorly judged letter might see you kneeling at the church gate for 3 consecutive Sundays, as the townsfolk pelted you with wilted vegetables, a remarkably blunt form of public review, free of charge. You may not survive this tale, not because the story is perilous, but because the world it recalls is one where even affection could be turned against you. So, before we continue, you may give this video a like if you wish, or subscribe, if the thought of returning to such peculiar times intrigues you. You can also leave a comment, share where you are listening from, and the hour it finds you there. It is always a quiet wonder to know how far these words might travel. Now, dim your lights, perhaps turn on a small fan, to weave a soft hum beneath the tale, and let us settle in, side by side, for tonight's story. But do be cautious. There may yet be eyes behind the lace curtain, and if you should happen to smile, well, someone will be writing an anonymous complaint before the hour is out. Let us begin. Chapter 1. You are not dating. You are being bartered. You wake on what some might generously call a bed, though it is little more than a wooden frame beneath a straw mattress that last night introduced you to exactly 17 sharp stalks, along with 3 more that looked suspiciously like cat grass. You pull the blanket closer. It is cold. The window offers no glass, only a thin sheet of stretched animal skin that flutters faintly in the early breeze. It is April, though the air remains heavy with winter's stubborn chill. The room smells of old smoke, worn goat hide, the damp must of a blanket older than your mother, and something else, wafting from the corner, where an abandoned jar has not been touched since last Christmas, and likely never will be. You rub your eyes. Another day begins. You do not yet know that by its end, you will be valued much like a young heifer at the village market. Morning follows its usual pattern. You eat a slice of bread so hard it could pave roads, dipping it into cold fat whose grey surface offers little in the way of comfort. You drink boiled water from a metal jug that tastes like the blacksmith's forge smells, a flavour one learns to tolerate, though never to enjoy. You head to the fields and help your father gather wood. After the 10th bundle, he says that you will finish early today, that you should return home soon, because something important awaits. You think little of it. Perhaps the granary needs airing, or the leak in the roof where the cat likes to sleep has worsened again. You do not know that your father has already shared plum wine with old Giles, the goat farmer from the eastern side of the village. Not once, not twice, but 3 times this very week, nor that today, you will be formally transferred. When you return home, your mother is brushing your hair, an event rare enough to give you pause, as most days your hair is secured with an old rope. She says to sit still, because there will be guests. That word catches in your mind. Guests do not usually prompt this kind of preparation. This kind of brushing happens when someone is coming to inspect the goods. You try to ask why, but your mother simply smiles. The same smile she wears when whispering soothing nonsense to a chicken whose neck she is about to wring. You know better than to ask again. Soon, the guests arrive. Old Giles enters first, round and red-faced, with a moustache that resembles a poorly kept hedge. The plum wine on his breath could be bottled and sold as a weapon. Beside him stands his wife, Marjorie, whose sharp eyes scan you from head to toe with the practiced gaze of someone used to judging turnips and cabbages at market stalls. She declares you pretty enough. And Giles, with a grin, remarks that you look sturdy, patting your father's shoulder with the same congratulatory air one might use when appraising a fine plough horse. You remain seated, hands clutched tightly around your skirt. No one asks your opinion. No one inquires whether this is what you want. Because this is not dating. This is bartering. The negotiation begins at the table. Another jug of wine appears. Your mother offers stale cakes left over from last year's New Year celebration. You listen as numbers float through the room like leaves on a restless wind. 3 goats are mentioned. A small plot of western land, 5 sacks of oats. Your father attempts to bargain for 2 egg-laying hens. Giles laughs and agrees, though he insists that your father will not be allowed to choose which hens. A final nod seals the agreement. While the grown-ups bargain over your future, you think only of one thing. Will they let you take your grey cat with you? It may well be the only creature in your new life that does not look at you as a transaction. The guests depart in the afternoon. Your parents call you over, and your father, with a softness you have rarely heard in his voice, tells you that Giles is a good man, that he owns land, that he keeps goats and works his fields. Your mother adds that Marjorie is strict but capable, and that you will live in comfort. You remain silent. It is not that you refuse to answer. It is simply that no answer has been requested. The path has already been chosen for you. There is no choice. No alternative. No escape. Tomorrow, you will visit Giles' house for a formal introduction. And within the month, there will be a wedding. It will not be the wedding of your dreams. If you ever allowed yourself to dream of such things, it will not be a union you sought, nor one you may decline. You think of the stories you once heard, tales of knights and maidens, of secret glances exchanged in rose gardens beneath the stars. You look down at your hands, rough from days spent harvesting grain, and at your feet, cracked and raw from frozen fields. There are no rose gardens here. There is only goat dung and a marriage bed beside a man who smells of old barrels and plum wine. That night, you lie awake beneath your thin blanket. Your grey cat curls upon your stomach, purring softly as your fingers stroke its fur, tears sliding quietly into your freshly brushed hair. You are not dating. You are being exchanged. You are merchandise, passed along with an unspoken warranty of usefulness. And yet, in some small, stubborn corner of your heart, the question still stirs. Might there be something more? A glance not measured in land or livestock. A word not weighted with obligation. Something that might resemble love. You cannot know. You only know this. When the rooster crows tomorrow morning, you will be a bride, no matter what your heart may wish. Chapter 2. Courtly Love. A beautiful story not meant for you. You open your eyes. But this time, you are not lying in a straw-filled hut that smells of goats and old smoke. Today, you are a lady, a noblewoman with a proper name, inhabiting a grey castle whose stone walls are as cold as the whispered judgments of your ancestors, whose portraits line the halls in perpetual disapproval. You wear a silk gown with a high neck and sleeves, so long they could sweep the corridors if left to their own devices. Your hair is pinned high and held in place with a silver clasp. Your old nurse once warned you, never remove it in front of men, for they might misunderstand. You smile, though not from joy. In your world, smiling is not an expression but a survival tool. One well-placed smile can save an entire family, while a single frown may send you directly to a convent, from which there are no returns, exchanges, or refunds. And then, one afternoon, as sunlight slices through stained glass, you see him, a knight, riding through the courtyard, his armor gleaming. His golden hair shines with the luster of perfectly toasted egg noodles. His blue eyes catch yours for a moment, accompanied by a tilted smile that makes it clear he is well aware of the attention he commands, and entirely comfortable with it. You allow yourself a glance. No more. Already knowing this can lead nowhere worth going. In your world, love is not meant for marriage. It is meant for poetry and for dying of longing, alone, in your chamber or, if one is particularly foolish, in a pointless duel. The truth is simple. Courtly love was invented by those with too much time, too few prospects, and a truly disastrous understanding of human emotions. You are not allowed to date, or to confess affection, or to hold hands, but you are permitted a series of small performances. You may receive love letters that stretch to 40 lines, 30 of which contain words you have never heard spoken aloud. You may be given tokens, an embroidered scarf, a belt, perhaps even a fallen button. each one supposedly proof that his heart belongs to you, though it will soon belong to someone else more financially convenient. You may witness him sigh. From afar, through 3 stone walls, 2 iron grills, and one aunt whose vigilance could put the best sheepdog to shame. You may even hear him sing a serenade beneath your balcony, unless the weather intervenes, or your father, who has long since tired of such nonsense, rigs a bucket of water above the railing for such occasions. As for you, you must play your assigned role. You are to be the unattainable woman, and you must reject every advance with such elegance that the suitor is encouraged to persist. You must reply to each letter in a tone that denies him yet leaves a sliver of false hope. Something along the lines of, "I cannot accept this handkerchief unless," on the night of the full moon, flowers bloom upon the eastern wall of the castle and fate allows it, which is to say, never, but with polite enough wording to ensure another letter will follow. Do you imagine this love was pure? It was not. It was a highly regulated social game. The man was expected to suffer. The woman was expected to remain distant. The rest of the castle was expected to gossip endlessly, for the entertainment of all, and it was never meant to progress further. Should it do so, you would find yourself treated like mold upon a wedding cake, a cautionary tale whispered in every corner. Forever. One day, that night sends you a token, a small silver ring hidden within a teacup. You glance about the room. Your mother is seated nearby, sewing with a gaze as sharp as a paring knife. One look from her would be enough to determine, in an instant, whether your heart had been stirred. You lift the teacup. Your finger brushes against the ring, but you do not take it. You cannot. You draw a deep breath and smile as though you noticed nothing at all. Yet inside, your heart pounds with the rhythm of a festival drum. You know how this will continue. He will write again. Another poem will arrive. Perhaps a melody will be composed in your honor, or a handkerchief will come, soaked in theatrical tears, and you will continue to refuse, always gracefully, because that is the game. Love here is not meant to be fulfilled. It is designed to exist eternally in an unrealized state, like a musical note suspended in the air, never allowed to touch the ground. That night, you lie in bed as verses swirl through your mind, as persistent as fleas upon a woolen cloak. You know the ending to this story. One day, he will marry another woman whose dowry better suits his family's ambitions. And you, too, will be married to a balding baron who enjoys little more than discussing crops and taxes at great length. But does it truly matter? In the stories whispered by the servants, in the glances exchanged in cold stone corridors, you will have been a muse. And sometimes, one glance, one ring left untouched, is enough. Chapter 3. Peasant dating. Daydreaming through the village fair, you open your eyes. No longer a noblewoman in a tower, not even a figure in some half-remembered ballad. Just yourself, an ordinary soul with no title to speak of, living beneath a thatched roof that sheds straw more quickly than the blacksmith's hairline. You have no silk scarf to offer, nor gold ring to gift. What you do have is a bundle of cabbage, gathered fresh from the field just yesterday, bright and green, suitable as a present only if one has standards or appetite. Lean toward the flexible. And, of course, you have a heart, that most inconvenient possession, always ready to stumble out of rhythm precisely when you would prefer it not to. Today is the village fair, one of the rare moments in the year when you may leave the fields behind, shake the mud from your hem, and allow yourself to imagine that life might, in some small corner, contain a space for dreaming. You bathe in cold water until your skin protests with each scrub. Then you dress in what passes for your finest gown, meaning simply the one with the fewest visible patches. You tie your hair with a thin rope, not for lack of taste, but because in this village, a ribbon remains more myth than material. You glance into your reflection, wavering in a dented bronze basin whose surface distorts the image much like your father's promises distort the marriage he speaks of, with a man you do not wish to wed. Still, you smile, not to appear more beautiful, but simply to remind yourself that you can. You step out onto the village path. The ground remains soft from last night's rain, but such things matter little when the fair arrives but once each season. You know well what awaits. Stalls will line the square. Voices will rise above the din. Games will be played, wrestling matches staged, ring tosses cheered, and somewhere in the crowd, pairs of eyes will meet and part again beneath the thin veil of propriety. More than anything, there will be boys and girls, for once loosened from the usual watchful eyes, granted a sliver of freedom, narrow though it may be, yet wide enough for a glance or two. You see Will, the blacksmith's son, broad-shouldered and quick to smile, known as much for lifting all barrels without spilling a drop as for that particular tilt of the head that suggests he is entirely aware of his effect on the room. You do not look his way, at least, not yet. He, likewise, does not glance toward you. Such is the ritual, a careful game where to look too soon is to seem too eager, and to look too late is to seem slow or indifferent, either of which would ensure that every mouth in the village soon has something to say. You pass a stall where old ribbons are displayed, so they do exist, though priced as dearly as 2 chickens and a wool blanket, a reminder that your humble rope remains not only practical but, perhaps, a statement of understated fashion. Music begins, if it can be called that, for someone plucks a lute with a rhythm and tone that resemble a cat whose tail has just been trod upon. Still, it is music, and in its own imperfect way, it brings warmth to the moment. You sit with your friends, who lean in close and whisper with breathless urgency, informing you that Will is entering the ring toss, and that whoever receives a flower from him will, for this season, be known as the chosen one. You listen without comment, though inside, your heart already feels as if a ring has been tossed in its direction. The contest begins. The villagers gather in a loose circle. You stand to one side, carefully neither too near nor too far, for there is an art to such positioning that speaks of awareness without presumption. Will smiles and lifts a ring with deliberate ease, then with practiced motion sends it sailing toward the target, where it lands clean and sure. Drawing applause from those assembled, he reaches into the basket and selects a marigold, its bright color standing out against the rough weave of his tunic, and with steady steps he makes his way toward you. Your breath catches, your heart thudding with the erratic beat of a festival drum in the hands of an over-enthusiastic player. Yet outwardly you remain still, knowing that 10 old eyes, 20 young eyes, and every widowed aunt within sight are watching you with the precision of hawks. Will stops before you, says nothing, and simply offers the flower. You accept it with a smile measured to perfection, neither too broad to encourage rumor, nor too faint to cause offense. In this moment, survival lies in such subtle calculations. And then, true to the unspoken rules of the village, Will turns and walks away without another word, for to linger or speak further would unleash a tide of gossip that even the stoutest dam could not contain. You sit once more. Your friends waste no time in pinching your arm and informing you, as though you were unaware, that Will has given you the flower, and that now the entire village knows. You acknowledge this with a nod and a quiet sigh, for such is the nature of things here. You look down at the marigold, small and slightly crumpled, yet to you it holds the weight of poetry and song, all the romance that the nobles hoard within their castles now resting gently in your palm. As late afternoon settles in, you return home. Your mother sees the flower, says nothing, but lets out a sigh whose meaning is all too clear, for wedding discussions will surely follow before long. You place the flower in a cup of water, watching as it leans beneath the flickering glow of the oil lamp, and you wonder, could love truly grow from a moment such as this? Could Will one day ask your parents for your hand? Could you come to love the one you are told to marry? No one knows. No rules are written for such things. There are only hearts, and their stubborn inclination toward hope. You lie upon your straw bed, the marigold tilting gently beside you, and in a world where even a touch may bring punishment, today you received a flower. Tonight, you will dream of it, even if tomorrow. As always, you must return to the fields, for the heart remains the one part of you no punishment has ever silenced. Chapter 4. The church, the third wheel always present. You are in love, or at least, you think you might be. A wilted flower rests in a cup of water. A glance was once exchanged at the market. A few whispered words were shared during the village fair, and beneath it all lingers a quiet fear, as though a watchful gaze follows you, a gaze not unlike that of a cat draped in a monk's robe. For here, whenever two hearts dare to draw closer, a third presence is certain to appear. and that presence is the church. It is always there, not merely in the village square or on holy days, but in every glance you risk, in every whisper you lower your voice to speak, in every window that stands half open on a restless night. You may think yourself unseen as you walk beneath the trees, hands brushing by accident, yet somewhere beyond the leaves, without fail, a monk will be found picking berries, coincidentally positioned to overhear your laughter. You may be tempted to send a love letter, but you know well what the church has taught. Love letters are tools of temptation. A simple phrase such as "I miss you" may be twisted into a declaration of carnal desire, while a misplaced period may find itself catalogued as a mortal sin. Each week you attend church as expected. The old priest speaks from the wooden pulpit, his voice turning like a windmill caught against the wind, grinding on in slow, ceaseless rhythm. He speaks of love, though never the kind your heart hopes for. He teaches that love is sacrifice, that intimacy serves only to bring forth children and not for joy, and that those who seek joy within it have already fallen into the devil's embrace. You listen in silence. You glance at Will. He listens too. Both of you fix your eyes ahead, faces set and unmoving, as lifeless as 3-week-old bread left upon a forgotten shelf. Yet of all that the church imposes, it is confession that weighs heaviest. Once each year, you must enter the small wooden booth and speak aloud every thought you were meant to keep hidden. The priest will ask whether you have thought of another, whether you have entertained improper dreams, whether you have smiled when you ought not to have. You swallow, uncertain whether a smile at your cat should be considered an offense. Though you suspect it is best not to test the boundaries of forgiveness on such matters. You whisper instead that you may have thought of Will, once or twice. A silence follows. The priest sighs. His quill scratches across the page, as if you had confessed to setting the chapel ablaze. Your penance is assigned 3 prayers, 1 week without visiting the market, and above all, you must not look upon Will within 5 paces. You leave the booth with cold sweat upon your skin, though within you remains the simple wish to look upon Will, if only for 5 more steps. But the church holds a weapon more insidious than sermons or penance, for it wields rumors with unmatched precision. A widowed aunt stands near the back of the church, her eyes sharp and her ears attuned to every whispered word and passing glance, her role unofficial yet undeniable. You remember well the last time you looked at Will too long while queuing for communion bread. It took only 3 days for the entire village to believe that he would be carrying you home by sunset. Your mother nearly fainted. Your father retrieved his largest stick and set it by the door. The lesson was clear, and you learned it well. In church, no love remains unseen. And yet, the irony persists. The more the church forbids such feelings, the more they take root in the hearts it seeks to control. It is the familiar paradox of sin made irresistible by the simple act of forbidding it. You leave the church with head bowed and heart restless. You tell yourself that next time you will not look at Will. But when he picks up your fallen scarf at the gate and offers it to you with quiet hands, you blush as deeply as a boiled turnip beneath watchful eyes. You know the truth. Here, love is like grass growing between the stone walls of the church, covered in moss, pressed beneath the foot, forbidden to thrive, and yet it grows, it stays green, and the more it is stepped upon, the stronger it grows. You return home where your mother asks, without ceremony, whether you mentioned Will in your confession. You say nothing. Silence offers its own kind of safety here. Though silence, more often than not, is taken to mean yes. You sigh and sit before the small flower that has long since dried. You know that should matters progress, the church will intervene. Perhaps you may marry Will if fortune smiles upon you. Or perhaps you will be separated by the will of those who deem your heart unworthy. The church is not cruel. It simply follows the law. The law is cold. People are warm. And when cold law meets warm hearts, it is the hearts that suffer. You lie back as evening falls and the church bell rings once more. Its steady chime a reminder that here, love is never simple. Yet still, you love. Quietly, as one tends a small candle flickering among 1,000 rules. For even when the third wheel remains ever present, your heart still holds space for the first. Chapter 5. Love letters, a dangerous sport. You have fallen in love, though you understand all too well that here, Love is regarded as a high-risk legal activity. You had tried not to love. You told yourself that your thoughts would be confined to crops, to goats, to turnip stew, and to nothing more. But your heart, as ever, refused to comply. After the last market day, when Will smiled at you with such warmth that even a turnip might have blushed, had it possessed blood, you knew there would be no turning back. You wanted to tell Will. You wanted him to know that you cared. You wanted to send some small signal. But you could not stand in the market and announce your feelings for all to hear, nor could you wave across the fence, where Will's third aunt maintained her post with the vigilance of a fortress guard. This left but one option, a love letter. You reminded yourself that in this world, love letters are not for the faint of heart. They are a dangerous sport, governed by unspoken rules, fraught with risk, and offering both fleeting rewards and lasting punishments. You must play by these rules, or face shame in the marketplace, perhaps even forced to wear a sign declaring yourself an outlaw of unauthorized love. You took a piece of paper, not fine parchment scented with spices from distant lands, but a yellowed sheet torn discreetly from the back of your father as debt ledger. The faint outline of the word debt still showed through, which, you thought, was a rather fitting metaphor for your heart. You reached for a quill, its tip not particularly sharp, though you reasoned that if it could write at all, love might yet prevail. You dipped it in ink and began. Your first attempt read simply, Will. You stopped. You crossed it out, then tried Dear Will, though that too was quickly abandoned. You were not yet sure if Will could be called dear, as you had barely exchanged words. At last you settled on the simplest choice. Will. Safe. Neutral. And difficult to misinterpret. You continued, knowing that each word would be judged. Too direct, and you would be called shameless. Too vague, and Will might think you intended to discuss cabbage farming. You weighed each phrase carefully and wrote, I hope you are well. I still remember the flower from that day. Reading it back, you felt it resembled a letter to a traveling vegetable merchant. But it would have to do. For the closing, you followed the advice found in love letter guides handed down by wiser women. If fate allows, may we meet again beneath the moonlight. Moonlight always sounded romantic, yet remained vague enough that, if questioned, you could claim you had merely suggested a nighttime gardening session. You blew gently on the ink and folded the letter. Now came the matter of delivery. You could not deliver it yourself. You could not ask your mother, nor your father, and certainly not your cat, who, while excellent at catching mice, was far less suited to discreet postal work. You settled upon Elsie, the neighbor girl, 8 years old, fast as a squirrel and easily bribed with honey candy. You offered her a small piece and whispered that you needed a favor, one that no one must know of. Elsie's eyes shone with the thrill of a royal mission as you pressed the letter into her small hand and told her firmly, Give this to Will. Only Will. She darted away with the speed of a creature who had just been gifted 3 wooden horses. Your heart pounded, your palms felt clammy, for you knew that should the letter fall into the wrong hands, whether the widow's at the tavern or, worse, the confessional monk, your life as you knew it would be finished. The afternoon passed in restless haze. Food tasted wrong. Your blanket scratched. Even your straw pillow seemed intent on stabbing you with every shift. You wondered if Will would receive the letter at all, if he would read it, if he would reply, and if that reply might bring joy or regret. You knew nothing for certain, save this one truth. Once the game was in motion, it could not be undone. As evening fell and moonlight drifted faintly through the window, you heard a soft noise at the door. It was Elsie, grinning as though she had been crowned queen of the village. Will read it? She whispered. No one else knows, and will send this back for you. You accepted a small, hastily folded scrap of paper and unfolded it with trembling hands. There were 4 words inside. I keep that flower. You smiled, a small smile, quiet and steady, enough to warm the long winter night, but you reminded yourself that tomorrow, you must pretend to know nothing at the market. You must bow politely when you see Will. You must walk calmly past the church gates. For here, love conducted through letters remains the most dangerous sport. One slip could cost you everything, yet if played well, It may grant you some small piece of happiness, a few words folded away, a pressed flower in your heart. You smiled once more and drifted to sleep with the letter beside you, a letter no one else would ever know. Chapter 6. The ultimate level of flirting, an accidental touch. You are in love. You have sent a letter in secret and received 4 words in return. Words that caused your heart to pound with the wild rhythm of a festival drum echoing through an exorcism. And now, though you know better, you find your mind returning again and again to a single thought, one that carries more danger than it ought to. You are thinking about what it might be like to hold Will's hand. Of course, such a notion is as sensible as deciding to dance across the roof of the church, while the priest below delivers a stern sermon on virtue. But such is the nature of the heart. The more something is forbidden, the more stubbornly it insists on being imagined. In this place, a handhold is never just a handhold. It is a statement heard across layers of society and faith, carrying messages that may say "I love you," or "I intend to marry you," or "I have surely lost my mind," or even "I am prepared to challenge the church itself." Though most commonly, it will simply mean "I am about to feel the sharp sting of your mother's wooden spoon." You understand this. Will understands this. The entire village understands this. And still, the desire persists. Then, as it so often does, a chance arises without warning. It is market day. The air hangs damp beneath a steady drizzle, and the narrow paths between stalls are streaked with mud. You set out with a simple task, to buy eggs, thinking only of the errand. Or so you tell yourself. Near the egg stall, Will is already standing. His presence, as deliberate as yours, is meant to seem accidental. No words are exchanged, only the soft hiss of rain upon canvas, the restless squawking of chickens who sound rather like creditors pursuing an overdue account, and the unsteady beating of 2 hearts caught in a moment both ordinary and dangerous. You approach the stall and glance up just long enough to meet Will's eyes. In that instant the world seems to narrow, the quiet beneath the rain drawing sharp and thin. You wonder if the thunder you hear is real or simply the protest of an empty stomach long ignored. You reach toward the basket of eggs. So does Will. And for one breathless moment, your hands brush lightly, the contact so brief it could be mistaken for nothing at all, though to you it feels like a dragonfly skimming across a still pond where danger lurks below. Both of you pull back at once. Yet the touch has happened, and in this village, that is enough. Across the square, 3 old women seated near the vegetable stall exchange knowing glances. One leans toward the other, murmuring that she saw what just passed. The second replies that she too observed it. The third, already well practiced in her craft, begins weaving the tale that will. By nightfall, spread with the speed of mold creeping across a forgotten loaf of bread, you return home, where word has already outrun you. Your mother knows. Your aunt knows. Even the chickens in the yard seem to cast sidelong glances as you pass. Summoned to the hearth, you find your father watching you with the wary gaze of a man who has just discovered a prized cow grazing in the neighbor's field. Your mother sighs and asks whether it is true that you touched Will's hand. You open your mouth, intending to explain that it was an accident, but before the words can form, your mother declares that in this village, there are no accidents, only intentions. You lower your gaze and think, though you do not say it aloud, that if intention had played any part, your fingers would have lingered far longer, but such honesty would serve no purpose here. Already the briefest of touches is being treated as an act of rebellion. The next day arrives, and once again the market calls. You attempt to avoid Will, and Will does the same, yet in doing so you achieve precisely what you wish to avoid. For nothing draws attention more swiftly than 2 young people determined not to meet. Whispers follow your every step. See how they avoid each other, the voices say. Something must be going on. You wish you might sink into the earth itself and be forgotten, though the mud beneath your feet offers no such refuge. Instead, you walk with careful calm. Head steady. Gaze unwavering. A living statue tasked with the solemn collection of cabbage. That evening you lie awake beneath your thin blanket, your mind returning once more to that fleeting touch. It was no grand moment, no tale fit for song or story, yet it sent your heart racing as though it had been forced to run a race for which it had never trained. You remember the warmth of it, soft and slight, like brushing against a single, unguarded joy in a world built from prohibitions. You smile, though you know that tomorrow the whispers will grow louder still. Here, flirting is an art not of poetry or words, but of carefully staged accidental touches performed with the precision of military maneuver. 1 step to reach, 2 steps to withdraw, 3 steps to maintain a composed expression, and 4 steps to appear entirely engrossed in thoughts of turnips. And should anyone ask, you will reply with calm certainty that if your hand touched Will's, it was surely nothing more than coincidence amid the crowd. This is how one survives in a place where even the smallest happiness must be hidden from view. Later, as the house grows quiet and the oil lamp burns low, you lie beneath the worn blanket and stare at the ceiling. You know your mother will mention the touch again. The widowed aunt will retell it, no doubt with embellishments, to anyone willing to listen. But none of that matters. Among the countless rules and watchful eyes, you had one small moment that was yours alone. And tonight, that is enough. You will drift to sleep with a soft smile, your hands still remembering the warmth of that fleeting touch. Chapter 7. Do you get to choose whom you love? No. You are in love. The flowers have long since wilted in their cup. A letter rests folded away where no one may find it. A fleeting touch now lives forever in the unending chronicles of the village widows. And still, your thoughts drift forward to something more, to the notion of what they call pairing, or starting a family, or marriage. You picture the two of you walking hand in hand through the fields, building a home together, raising chickens, planting cabbages, waving blankets by the hearth, and singing lullabies beneath the gentle light of the moon. Yet it is easy to forget one small but immovable truth. Here, you do not get to choose. In this place, whom you love matters little. Whom you marry, on the other hand, is the true question, and the one you marry will be chosen not by you, but by your parents, by your family, by the weight of money and the measure of land and cattle and harvests, by a long tally of concerns that leave love entirely outside the ledger. You are, in the end, a side character in the story of your own marriage. Already your mother has begun speaking more often about how it is time to start considering such things. Your father sometimes sighs and taps his pipe upon the table, a small sound that marks the slow calculation of your supposed market value. You sit quietly by the window, watching raindrops gather and race along the wooden frame, and you wonder, if by some miracle you could choose, would you choose Will? The truth is, you do not know. And more than that, you understand you will not be given the chance to find out. Marriage here is not a matter of affection. It is a contract built upon trade, measurement, and negotiation. How many acres lie beneath Will's family name? How many goats stand in your family's field? Who owes whom from seasons past? Who once saved whom during the great flood of last year? Who once insulted whom beneath the oak tree at the village meeting? Every scrap of history can sway the outcome of your future. You might tell yourself that surely things are different among the nobility. But they are not. There, the trades simply involve castles and gold and power. Love remains standing outside the gate, uninvited and unwelcome. You once heard the tale of Alice, the blacksmith's daughter, who loved the carpenter's son with quiet devotion. For 2 years they gazed at one another through the gaps in the couched door, exchanging no more than a wooden comb and a pressed clover leaf. But one day her father received an offer from a wealthy widow, 4 vats of honey and a storehouse full of wool, and the matter was settled. Alice married the widow. The carpenter's son carved chairs for the rest of his life, his eyes hollow and distant, as though some small creature had stolen half his soul and left him incomplete. You sigh, for you know that Will understands this as well. Now each glance you share carries with it more bitterness than hope. Both of you know that if your family objects, or if Will's aunt disapproves, or if Will's soil is judged too poor, then your love will remain a story whispered in shadows, never one told beneath the sunlight of wedding clothes. And you know too that when that day arrives, when your father invites the guests, when your mother lays out new cloth and speaks of arrangements, it will not be a conversation about love. It will be a discussion of how much grain is to be included, how many pigs are to be promised, who will serve as witness, and who will bring the wedding cakes. When they do finally turn to you, it will be only so that you may nod politely, no more than dough pressed into a mold. Yet even so, you dream. For no one forbids dreams. You dream of an afternoon where we'll walks beside you through fields of flowers, of a small house with smoke rising gently from the hearth, of baskets of eggs hanging in the corner, and of holding hands without the need to pull away, of smiling without fear of being seen. You know these things may never happen. But still, you dream. Later, as you lie upon your bed, you hear your father's voice drifting from the next room. He mentions that old Giles has expressed interest, and that a new herd of goats may soon be part of the bargain. Your mother replies that it sounds promising. Your father asks about Will, and your mother's voice comes back without hesitation. Not much there. Poor soil. You bite your lip, a sharp ache rising in your head as if someone had reached in and crushed the memory of that small, precious touch. You understand, painfully well, that love is not part of this contract. Here, you may choose the color of your hair ribbon. You may choose how to wrap the cakes for the wedding, but your love, no, that is not yours to choose. You sigh, your eyes blurring, yet somewhere beneath the weariness of it all, you still hold on to hope, thin and fragile as cabbage leaves fluttering in the winter wind. Perhaps one day things might change. Perhaps somewhere within the cracks of these rigid rules, a small heart like yours may find space to choose its path, even once. Chapter 8. Flirting at the festival. Medieval window shopping. You wake to the soft glow of morning light filtering through the thatch above your head. Beyond the walls of your small house, the roosters are already in full voice across the village, their choir wildly out of tune. But today you pay them no mind. Nor do you notice the thin porridge waiting in its bowl, or your aunt's latest announcement that an old widower has inquired about marrying you. For today is festival day. It is one of those rare days when you may dress a little finer, walk a little lighter, and allow yourself to dream just a little more than the world usually permits. You wear your best dress, not because you wish to draw attention, but because attention will find you regardless. You tie your hair with care, not a ribbon. Check your teeth, knowing well that nothing ruins a smile faster than a stray piece of cabbage lodged where it ought not to be. When you step out into the street, you find the village dressed as well, its usual drabness hidden beneath faded flags and strings of wilting flowers, with 3 times the usual number of people filling the square. You know what this means. Today is the day of what everyone silently agrees to call emotional window shopping. No one speaks of it aloud, but all understand. At the festival, it is permitted to look at others, to look longer than usual, to look with intent, and to look without fearing the summons to confession that would follow on any other day. The rule remains simple. No touching, no kissing, and no gifts of greater significance than a cabbage. You spot Will among the crowd, and he, of course, sees you as well. Both of you know the dance that is about to begin, as familiar as 2 cautious cats circling a plate of dried fish, each knowing that whoever reaches first will surely lose. You wander past the stalls with practiced ease. There are honey cakes, bright ribbons, iron hooks, wooden combs laid out beneath the awnings. You pause to examine a handkerchief while Will positions himself 3 stalls away, pretending to study comms, though his eyes drift more often toward you than toward the merchandise. You recognize this well-rehearsed move, the pretending to shop while actually watching maneuver, and you are no amateur yourself. You lift the handkerchief, hold it lightly beneath your chin, and turn exactly 45 degrees, an angle known to enhance the face beneath soft sunlight, or so folk wisdom claims. Will smiles. You glance his way, then turn away just enough to send your own message. I see you seeing me, and I know that you see that I see you. The festival proceeds, and soon comes the ring dance, a time when young men display what grace they can manage in hopes of charming their way into someone's heart. Will joins the dance. You remain at a safe distance, 2 meters being suitable for illness, 10 meters being far safer when navigating medieval romance. Will dances well, neither too showy nor too stiff, with just enough ease to prompt approving murmurs from the watching aunts, who observe that he moves nicely. You pretend not to notice, though your ears remain as keen as a hungry fox awaiting its chance. Then comes the flower round. The winning dancer may present a flower, a moment both coveted and dangerous, for every gesture here will be scrutinized. Will wins. Your breath catches as he selects a white daisy, then begins to move through the crowd, each step echoing like a slow drum beat in your chest. At last, Will stops, not in front of you, but before his widowed mother, to whom he offers the flower with a graceful bow. The square fills with laughter. It is a perfect dodge, sending a message as clear as any spoken word. Today is not the day, but I know what must be done. You exhale, feeling both relief and a quiet flicker of regret. The rules are what they are, and a misplaced flower would have earned you weeks of tiresome explanation at the church. As evening falls, lanterns are lit and a modest feast is laid upon the tables. The wine, thin as bathwater fit only for woodland fairies, is poured freely, though few seem to mind. You linger near the bread table as the crowd begins to settle. Will passes close by and stops for the briefest moment, offering a glance, a nod, and a quiet sentence meant for you alone. "Nice day," he says. You reply softly, "Yes, nice day." And in that simple exchange lies enough to warm even the coldest of winters. Here, flirting does not rely on grand gestures. It rests instead on the subtle mastery of looking, and of knowing exactly how to look. Later, when you return home, the image of that white daisy lingers in your mind. You know well that without the rules, it might have been your hand to receive it, yet you also understand that such a gift given too soon could invite a storm. You lie down with that thought, holding close the slender hope that one day will might offer you a flower, not in the public theatre of a festival, not for show, but simply for you. And when that day comes, you will smile, not the smile of one gazing through a window, but the smile of one who has finally stepped through the glass. Chapter 9. Ancient Social Media. Rumors. You wake as morning light filters softly through the narrow gap beneath the door. Outside, a rooster greets the new day with a triumphant crow, as though it has just received a long-awaited promotion within the coop. You exhale, determined that today will be a peaceful one. You tell yourself that you will not dwell on yesterday's glance, nor on the simple words Will had offered, yet you forget, as so many do, that here in the village, peace is never granted freely. The moment you step beyond your door, Aunt Bay awaits. One hand clasps a basket of wary vegetables, the other already holding the freshest of today's rumors. She begins without pause. "Someone," she says, "received a greeting from Will at yesterday's festival." You force a faint smile and say nothing, but silence here is a confession of its own kind. Aunt Bay continues, noting that such a simple greeting will surely fuel conversation for at least a month. You know this well, and you know, too, that this is merely the beginning. Here, rumors are the strongest network of all. No wires or parchment are needed. Only 3 old women, a tavern, and the slow drift of an idle afternoon. They travel faster than the blacksmith sneezing after too much bad beer, and with accuracy no better than an arrow loosed into the fog by someone who has never held a bow. But of course, accuracy is not the point. What matters is having something worth saying. As you walk to the market, you feel it. Each glance lingers a fraction longer than usual. Each smile carries an extra knowing tilt. The egg seller greets you with a look that says far more than words. The wine seller asks whether the flower yesterday had been to your liking. No one speaks directly, but everyone speaks around you. It is a game in which participation is not optional. You complete your errands with careful calm. Yet as you turn to leave, you catch the whispers that follow. "That girl," they say. "Yes, knew it all along." You sigh, knowing full well that you and Will have never held hands, have never exchanged more than 3 short sentences. Yet here in the realm of rumor, truth holds no particular value. Medieval social media runs upon its own strange logic. Good news spreads slowly, bad news spreads fast, love stories move faster than the plague. The algorithm, if one may call it that, works simply. 1 person sees, 3 people know, 10 people embellish. Before long, the entire village believes that you and Will are already expecting a child, though all that was said was nice day. You sit with a drink, hoping for a moment's quiet, but through the open tavern window the voices drift clearly. The young these days are bold. One says, always glancing. Another replies, "There will be a wedding soon, I expect." You wish you could vanish beneath the table, but the table is packed earth, offering no such refuge. You think, for a moment, about explaining. Then you remember. To whom would you explain? And who would choose to listen? Here, explanations only fuel the fire. The more you insist that nothing happened, the more they are certain that something did. The more you remain silent, the more their certainty grows. It is a game from which there is no exit. Later that afternoon, you see Will in the fields. Your eyes meet, but neither of you speaks. Both of you understand. You have been tagged, without your consent, in a relationship that no one has confirmed. Will smiles and shakes his head with a quiet laugh. You smile in return, half helpless, half knowing that even without having done anything, you are now a couple in the eyes of the village. When you return home, you find that your parents have heard. Your father remarks that if you truly like Will, he will begin making preparations. You give a wry smile, for you have barely had time to decide what it is you feel. All you heard was a greeting, but the rumor has already run far ahead. You know what this means. From now on, every glance will be measured, every movement watched as though you were a new cow joining the herd. Looking at will be wrong. Not looking will be wrong. Smiling will be wrong. Failing to smile will be wrong. And so you walk with the careful grace of a cat upon the kitchen roof, knowing that inside, your wary laughter echoes like the beat of a hollow drum. That night, you sit beneath the dim glow of the oil lamp. The old flower still rests nearby. You think of love, of letters, of a single fleeting touch, each already difficult enough. Now, with medieval social media added to the mix, romance has become the riskiest sport of all. You sigh and smile faintly, for though rumors may shake the village, they can never reach the one place that matters most. Your true feelings remain yours alone. And that, you know, you will keep tucked safely away, like a pressed flower held close within your heart. Chapter 10. Dating among the lower classes. Survival first, love later. You may have heard stories of romance unfolding in castles, tales of knights kneeling beneath windows, of ladies offering embroidered scarves, of love letters written longer than the priest's sermons. But such stories belong to people with the rare luxury of having time to dream. For the rest of the world where you live, and where most people live, the idea of finding a partner is a far more practical affair. If it can be called dating at all, it is a matter rooted first in survival, and only after that, if there is room left, in sentiment. Here, a life partner is chosen with the same deliberation one might use when choosing a good cow. You ask if they are strong enough to carry the weight of the seasons ahead, if they can work the fields without tiring too soon, if they will bear children who can one day do the same, and whether their family owes anyone money that might come knocking later. Only when these questions have been answered, and rarely with much enthusiasm, does the thought of love creep into the conversation. You wake to another day with no thought of poetry in your mind, only the scent of porridge that will soon burn if you do not rise to stir it. You pull on your coat, its edges worn thin from long days spent beneath sun and rain. You step into your shoes, their soles nearly bare, but still sturdier than a heart worn thin by too many unanswered wishes. When you reach the fields, the sun has not yet climbed far. The ground remains damp beneath your feet, and Will is already there, turning the soil with steady rhythm. Neither of you speaks. The two of you move side by side, sharing the work in the silence, exchanging no more than the occasional glance while your hands remain occupied with earth and weeds. Here, flirting takes place between the strokes of a hoe, not beneath balconies or beneath the glow of a moonlit sky, but in the thick air of sweat and mildew and the cawing of impatient crows. It is a scene built from the plain materials of everyday life. You know well that if you wish for an easier path ahead, you must marry wisely, and wisely here rarely means marrying for love. It means choosing someone who will keep your household standing. A blacksmith, for instance, would be a sound choice. Someone whose strength can bring coin to the table, though you would also rise each morning to the smoke and hammering that come with the trade. A carpenter would be another possibility. with skilled hands to fashion the things a home needs. Though you would surely find yourself answering endless requests from relatives seeking new cabinets. A farmer, perhaps the most sensible of all, with land and goats to his name, though his mind would likely remain more fixed on grain and livestock than on matters of affection. You glance at Will and know he brings little of what your parents would list as requirements. He holds no great wealth, owns no wide field, but there is warmth in his smile and something in his eyes that makes you forget for a moment that you were meant to be pulling caterpillars from the cabbage. You know that in this place, choosing between a full heart and an empty stomach is a puzzle everyone must face, and few find an answer they can live with easily. Your parents speak plainly. Love is a foolish notion, they say. You must marry someone who can work the land, manage a household, and keep a family fed. There is no room in this equation for dreams, and you do not argue. No one argues when the one holding the family broom speaks with the finality of law. And yet, beneath it all, you dream. You wonder whether it might be possible, against the odds, to find both a husband who can meet your family's expectations and someone whom you might also care for. It sounds impossible, but then again, so do most of the dreams that live here. Later, as you fetch water from the well, Will arrives as well, and the two of you stand side by side. No words are exchanged, yet now and then your eyes meet. And here, such a glance says far more than any spoken vow. You know, however, that looking is the easy part. Marriage is another matter entirely. At the next village meeting, the mothers begin their quiet calculations, yours among them. One mentions that the blacksmith's son is of age. Another notes that the shepherd's household will soon need a daughter-in-law. And then your family joins the conversation, acknowledging that it is time to make plans. You listen, each word falling into your heart like small stones sinking slowly beneath the surface. You would like to say that you wish to choose someone you love. But here, such a wish spoken aloud would turn the evening meal into an interrogation. Love, in this world, is a luxury. It is not a requirement for marriage. You return home and glance at the basket of eggs upon the table, at the pile of cabbage beside it, and at your own hands, rough and worn from the life you lead. You wonder whether, if you married Will, the days might feel lighter. You know that he will not bring you riches, but perhaps he would bring something else. Rainy afternoons spent beside a small window, evenings warmed by a modest fire. Small gestures of affection that need not be hidden. You sigh, knowing that the choice may not be yours to make. Yet you also know that if there is even the faintest chance to hold on to what you feel, you will take it. As night falls, you lie upon your straw bed and listen to the frogs beyond the walls, and to your parents' voices in the next room as they discuss the marriages that might soon be arranged. You dream a simple dream, no silk dresses or castle halls, only a warm hut, someone who understands you, and one true smile. Here, love need not be grand. It only needs to be real. And though you know well the rules of this game, you still hope, quietly and stubbornly, to play one round for yourself. Chapter 11. When things go too far. Scandal. You have loved. You have dared to flirt. You have touched hands. You have weathered 100 rumors, listening to them drift through the air like a carp beneath the surface of a pond, unable to stop the falling rain, able only to wait and listen as it passes overhead. And yet, despite all your caution, things continued. You and Will, for all your care, slipped. A glance held too long beneath the gaze of others, a greeting that carried too much warmth, a moment shared by the well. Thought harmless, but not unnoticed, for a certain widow had been nearby, bent to the ground in a performance of weed picking while her ears strained to catch what her eyes could not. And that was enough. The scandal began without warning. You do not know when the news first spread. Perhaps it was when that widow carried her weeds home, her basket now twice as full with fresh gossip. Perhaps it was when the tavern owner sprinkled a few extra words to help his patrons swallow their thin all more easily. Or perhaps, in the quietest irony of all, it was when your cat paused to look at Will with just a little too much interest. However it began, by morning the entire village knew. You walk to the market, sensing the shift before a single word is spoken. The air itself seems different. heavy with something unspoken. Smiles now greet you, but they arrive seasoned with a pinch of mockery that was not there before. The wine seller eyes you from across the stall and remarks that it surely will not be long now. You return a strained smile, though inside you know that any reply, no matter how measured, will be reshaped and repeated before it reaches the next listening ear. You turn toward the vegetable stall where the girl selling greens leans closer and whispers that Will is kind and will surely be gentle. Whatever happens, you flush, not from anger, but from the knowledge that such a line will wear 10 new costumes by the time the sun sets. That evening brings the inevitable family meeting. You are summoned to sit before your parents, the hearth's warmth doing little to ease the chill that has crept into your bones. Your father speaks first and asks if there is anything you wish to say. You remain silent, not from lack of words, but because words will not sway a story the village already believes. Your mother adds that Will is a good man, but reminds you that the rules here do not bend easily, and she asks, with more wariness than anger, whether anything between you has gone too far. You nearly choke upon the air you breathe. The idea that a simple greeting or a glance could now be weighed alongside theft or betrayal. You shake your head and reply that nothing happened. Your father sighs, his gaze free of anger but heavy with the knowledge that even the smallest misstep now risks pulling your family into a spiral of whispers with no clear end. Yet beyond rumor, there is something worse. There is punishment. Here, when matters are judged to have gone too far, the church steps in. It begins with public penance. 3 Sundays spent kneeling before the entire village at the church door, head covered in rough cloth, a sign draped across your shoulders declaring you a wrongdoer. You have seen this before. The neighbor's daughter once held a glance too long with the landlord's son. 3 Sundays later, no one would meet her eyes. You think of this and feel the coldness spread along your spine. Will understands this too. You meet by chance after the market, both arriving at the well at the same hour. You stand before one another, silent at first, as though the space between words has grown too wide to cross. At last, Will speaks softly, saying that he does not want you to face that fate. You smile, though the smile holds more sadness than comfort, and you tell him that you do not want to see him standing before the priest either. You remain there for a moment, 2 people bound by the knowledge that love now carries with it the weight of resistance. You sigh and lower your gaze to your hands, wondering whether any of this is worth the cost. And yet, you already know the answer. Even if it is only to protect something that still feels true, it is worth it. But the world does not soften. The next morning, the priest visits your home. He does not come for tea. He enters with careful politeness, asks a few questions framed with gentleness, though each one lands sharp as a blade. You listen as he reminds you that rumor may do more harm than sin itself, and that all eyes are watching. You nod and say nothing, knowing that any word you speak now will only thicken the notes he is already composing in his mind. That night, beneath your thin blanket, you lie awake and think of the day. You think of Will, and of the look in his eyes when he told you that he did not want you to face shame. You know that this love may not travel far. One day, you may be married to another, Will may be married to another. And yet, what you share now, glances, a touch, a simple nice day, and a shared fear, is as real a love as any you could hope to find in this world. And sometimes, to love truly, in a place built from hollow customs and watchful eyes, is already its own quiet victory. You close your eyes and hold that victory close, as one might hold a fragile flower against a storm of rumors that cannot reach what is guarded within the heart. Chapter 12. Marriage is not a happy ending. You might believe that after all the rumors, the glances exchanged beneath careful eyes, the fleeting touches disguised as accidents, marriage would arrive as the perfect ending to this story. After all, that is how the ballads tell it, how the songs sound when the old beggar sings them in the market, and how it plays out in dreams that always seem far too simple. But here, marriage is not a happy ending. It is an ending. Certainly. But whether happiness has any place within it depends less on love and more on the weight of your husband's purse, and on the strength of the rope hanging quietly beside the kitchen wall. You sit in the small house where your mother cuts fabric for your wedding dress. The cloth is rough and thick, a greyish white that resembles December fog mixed with soot. You look at it and say nothing, because words now would be no more useful than shouting at a windmill to stop turning. Outside, your father inspects the dowry. He reads the items aloud, one by one. 10 chickens, 3 sacks of grain, 1 iron, and 1 cow well past her prime. You hear each word like a list of dry inventory at the end of a lean harvest. Love is not among the items read aloud. No one mentions it. As for the groom, he is a tall man, strong enough by the village's standards, and still blessed with more teeth than most around him. He is not will lacks land, lacks grain, and carries the burden of a difficult aunt. And as for you, you do not get to choose. You will nod when asked and smile when required. That will be enough. On your wedding day, you wear the new dress, stiff beneath your skin, thick as though sewn from the bark of an old tree. You step outside to the sound of music that carries no notes of love, but rather the familiar tune of Who Is Paying for the Wedding Today, a song well known among weddings such as yours. Inside the church, the priest stands before you, looking first at you, then at the groom, then at your gathered parents. No one meets your eyes. You feel as though you have become no more than a walking sack of grain about to change hands. The ceremony begins. You vow, not out of love, but because it is required. You exchange rings, the band of black iron heavy against your hand, weighted with promises you were never given the chance to write. You lower your gaze as a quiet question forms within your mind. Is this love? Later, the wedding feast unfolds in the yard. There is hard bread, thin wine, laughter loud enough to mask all that is unspoken, and far too many glances you would rather not meet. You sit beside your new husband, exchanging few words, for both of you understand well enough that this is not the start of dreams. It is the beginning of duty. You eat a piece of bread dry enough to rival your cousin's worst attempts at baking. Someone nearby offers a toast, wishing you both a long life, though the tone carries the faintest edge, as if to say there is no turning back now. You smile, not from joy, but because smiling is easier than allowing tears to fall at the table. That night, upon the new bed with its unfamiliar blanket and the faint scent of damp and ash lingering in the air, you sit in silence. Your husband enters, saying little. There is no speech, no poetry, only the briefest of words. You should sleep, for tomorrow begins early. You lie down, half relieved, half unsure what to feel, and tell yourself quietly that you now have a husband. Yet it feels less like freedom and more like exchanging one chain for another that happens to weigh a little less. In the days that follow, you learn what it means to be a wife, not through lessons in love, but through the daily demands of duty. You learn to cook rice just bland enough to avoid scolding, to wash clothes without worsening their frayed edges, and to dodge the aunts whose questions about your nights offer no safe answers. You learn to smile when your husband remarks kindly upon the flowers you place in the salt jar, and you learn not to cry when, alone at night, you find your thoughts drifting back to Will's touch by the well. You do not hate your husband. You do not hate this life. You simply come to understand that marriage here is what it is, not an ending brightened by music and fireworks, but an unending work contract with no holidays. You work. You live. You smile when needed. You fall silent when required. And sometimes, on a quiet afternoon, when your husband is in the field and the house holds its hush, you sit by the stove and look upon the dried flower you have kept hidden away. You know that love, if it exists, must be self-fed, self-kept, not expected to blaze, but only hope not to fade. You touch the fragile petal gently and hold within yourself a space that is still yours alone. For you know that marriage is not a happy ending, but neither must it be the ending of all happiness, so long as you can keep, quietly and stubbornly, a little love for yourself. Chapter 13. When love is a sin. You are married. You have a husband. You have learned when to smile, when to remain silent, and you have come to understand one thing more deeply than you once believed possible. Here, love, if it does not bear the approval of the church, is treated as a kind of sin, not because you love the wrong person, not because you love while already bound in marriage. Simply to love at all is enough to make the angels frown and the devils it seems. Smile. The Church speaks plainly on this matter. Love must exist within marriage and must serve the purpose of producing children. Love that brings too much joy for its own sake is swiftly condemned as temptation. You heard these teachings from an early age, and you once believed the adults spoke them for effect, exaggerating to hold the attention of restless children. But now, as a wife, you understand. There is little exaggeration in their words, only a long and wary list of what must not be done. And at the very top of that list is loving with a true heart. You remember well the day the priest spoke on the subject of carnal love. His voice was steady, his face set and stern, like bread left to harden through 4 unforgiving seasons. All pleasure beyond the duty of marriage, he said, is sin, and those who let their hearts lean toward emotion open a door through which the devil gladly enters. You sat and listened, your husband seated beside you. Neither of you dared to meet the other's gaze, nor did either of you dare to reach for the other's hand, though it would have been your right. Even such a touch in that setting could have sent the widow next door into a swoon of moral outrage. From that moment forward, you began to learn a new skill. You learned to love with restraint, to smile within limits, and to look upon your husband as you would a crop in the field, valued, but never too fondly. For you knew well that if your smile grew too sweet while pouring wine at your husband's table, the priest would surely visit the next day, not to inquire about the harvest, but to ask whether your heart remained pure. You would nod, as required, while sighing quietly within. Yet the greatest irony remains this: the more you are told to resist such feelings, the more they insist on rising to the surface. You tried. Of course. You told yourself not to think of Will, and in doing so, you summoned him all the more vividly into your mind, as if he were some polite ghost carrying a dried flower. You smiled bitterly at this truth, knowing that if there were a prize for the most persistent thought, Will would have claimed it long ago. You never spoke of this to your husband, not from fear, but because you understood that he, too, had been taught the same lessons. He, too, had learned not to let his heart grow soft, nor to let his eyes linger too warmly. For should they do so, his mother would soon ask whether he had allowed the devil to tempt him. And here, the devil takes many forms: a glance held too long, a greeting offered with too much warmth, a touch granted without the proper excuse of necessity. You know that some married couples do truly love one another, but even they must perform their love with careful precision, as though playing out a censored play. A loving glance is reserved for moments alone, a kind word spoken only in the kitchen, when no aunts are near to overhear, a hand held only while lifting a basket of potatoes, never for its own sake. You learn from them and tell yourself that if you are to love, it must be like this: quiet, controlled, hidden. But beneath all of this, a simple truth remains. You still love someone who is not your husband, not through your actions, not through your words, but within a small corner of your heart where no other can reach. You guard that corner as carefully as one guards salt against the damp of winter. Each time someone mentions Will, you offer a faint smile, as though he were nothing more than a passing cabbage seller. But you know that memories do not die so easily. They rest quietly, like a cat upon a kitchen shelf, ready to leap when the moment calls. You do not know what the future holds. Perhaps you will forget. Perhaps you will come to love your husband truly. Or perhaps you will carry this love with you always. A love never granted permission to bloom, pressed instead between the pages of a life no one dares to open. You sigh, and then you smile, for you understand. Though they may call it a sin, though you may be warned 1,000 times, love remains the one thing within you that no one can command. Not the priest, not the widows, not the doctrine etched upon stone. And in that understanding, you find a small measure of peace. In this world, where rules are drawn so tightly around the heart, you close your eyes and allow yourself one gentle dream. A dream that needs no penance, no permission. A dream in which love, at last, may be simply allowed to be. Chapter 14. Noble affairs, a dangerous game. You may think that peasants have it hard in matters of the heart. You may think that a simple touch exchanged at the market is enough to set the church bells ringing. And in this, you would be right. But that is the game played by those below. Among the nobility, where the castles stand as cold and unyielding as a monk's palm after a long fast, matters of the heart offer no greater freedom. They are simply different. More dangerous, more complicated, and far more dramatic than every play performed in the square combined. You are not a noble, but the stories reach even your ears. They drift down through the words of nurses, through the loose tongues of drunken guards, through the whispers of servants whose ears are sharper than the finest apple peelers. And you understand this much. In the castle, love is an extreme sport, but here the stakes are life itself. The rules, though uneven, are clear enough. Noblemen may keep discreet affairs, provided they do not shame their wives too publicly. Noblewomen, on the other hand, may not keep affairs at all. They may not dream of them, nor write poems about them, nor breathe too deeply in the presence of another man. And if they are caught, the consequences are swift. A nobleman, if discovered, may be scolded by his wife. A noblewoman faces the blade, or if fortune smiles faintly, the damp solitude of a tower where the moss will be her most faithful companion. Such is the balance of justice, as steady as a three-legged stool with one leg already broken. But where there are rules, there will always be those who choose to test them, especially among noblewomen left too long in cold chambers, reading French love poems and watching bare-armed guards pass beneath their windows. Picture this. You are seated in a stone room. Your husband has ridden out to hunt or to attend council, or perhaps to visit some well-favored lady in another castle. You remain behind with your books, a solitary cat, and the quiet gaze of a certain guard who lingers just a little too long beneath your window. And soon enough, you begin to think. And thinking, in this game, is the first sin on a very long list of forbidden acts. Some noblewomen are clever. They know how to play within the limits allowed. They send messages through knotted ribbons, each knot a letter, each strand a line to be carefully untied and read. Others hide words in song, or slip letters within pastries, though there is always the risk that a hungry guard might devour both the pastry and the secret it carries. At times, you think perhaps that would be for the best. If all love affairs could be so easily digested and forgotten, there would surely be fewer scandals to recount. But not all goes smoothly. Some affairs are caught, and when they are, the entire castle will know before the next dawn. You once heard the story of Lady Eleanor? Her husband was away. She fell quietly and entirely for her son's music teacher, a romance as fitting as it was doomed. One afternoon, while they were checking chords in a private room, her husband returned unexpectedly. The result was swift. The music teacher was granted a one-way journey to the dungeon, and Lady Eleanor was carried to the highest tower. The lesson, of course, is simple. Never play music when your husband is the forgetful type. You wonder, knowing the dangers, why they persist in such pursuits, and the answer is always the same. Because it is forbidden, and forbidden things, as the world proves time and again, attract. Love within such halls is like aged cheese, risky to taste, but impossible for some to resist. Those who are wise learn to flirt in ways that can always be denied. A glance held for a moment too long, a half-finished verse, a walk through the garden beneath the moonlight that can be explained away. And when questioned, the answer comes easily enough. I was only admiring the flowers. Such a line has saved more than one lovely head from falling, but no love in that world is truly safe. Even if it escapes discovery, living with the fear of being found is its own soft prison. In time, most noblemen learn to adapt. They write poems, and they burn them. They smile when required. They allow themselves to glance at the ones they love through veils and stone walls, loving a shadow they dare not name. And you, lying in your bed, think upon all this. You know well enough that being a poor peasant is no easy life, but at least, here below, you may still love without fearing the axe. A touch, a secret letter, a glance exchanged is enough to feel alive. Up there, beneath fine robes and within colder halls, they love in fear. You sigh and think, love is always dangerous. The only difference is in whose hand the knife is held. Chapter 15. Dating through poems and ballads. The medieval influences. You might believe that if love in life is so difficult, then surely poems and ballads would offer some comfort to the heart, a soft space where hope could rest. You might hope that through these songs, the idea of loving and being loved might somehow feel possible. And yes, they do offer hope. But sadly, it is a hope sold as carefully curated entertainment, not a promise to be lived. In truth, the influencers of the medieval world were not noble ladies or gallant knights, but wandering poets who carried with them a lute, a pen, and a small portion of the fragile hopes that people still dared to hold. You once heard such a ballad at the fair last year. A ragged bard stood in the square, his cloak dusty, his lute worn thin, his voice rough from too many stale loaves and watered wine. But when he sang, the crowd held its breath. The song told of a princess who loved a humble hunter, loved him so dearly that she cast off her crown and followed him into the deep woods. It was a story as sweet as honey left in the jar for 3 long years, far too sweet to be true, yet still pleasant enough to savor. You listened, and for a moment, your heart softened, but then you glanced at your mother, who stared at you with a look that seemed to say, "If you ever run off after some hunter, I will chase you with the broom myself." You lowered your head, knowing full well that in songs, love is grand, but in life, brooms fly faster than dreams. And yet, here lies the curious truth. Those poems and ballads became the models for how people imagined love should be. Girls dreamed of noble knights, boys dreamed of princesses laughing beneath the wind. And no one seemed to notice that the knight was busy guarding fields, the princess was bound by political contracts, and the bard himself was likely fleeing the innkeeper to whom he still owed for ale. You once knew a village girl named Maud who listened to so many ballads that she began imagining herself as a muse. Each day she would go to the well dressed in white, flowers braided in her hair, waiting for some rider to appear. But after 3 harvests, only 3 goats, 1 blacksmith, and 4 old women pulling weeds had passed her way. No night came. Eventually, Maud married the pig farmer's son. When you asked if she was disappointed, she smiled and said that at least he could cook. A knight, after all, might be less reliable in the kitchen. You nodded, for sometimes life requires more than a ballad. And it was not only the girls who were swayed. The boys, too, found themselves drawn in. You once saw Will standing alone in the field, gazing at the moon and murmuring love verses beneath his breath. You teased him, asking whom he was charming, and he blushed, claiming he was only reciting for fun. But you knew well enough that had it been just for fun, he would not have chosen the one spot where the moonlight fell so perfectly. You said nothing, only smiled, thinking that ballads were perhaps the oldest tool for gentle self-deception. Yet, to be fair, it was these same ballads that gave many the courage to dream at all. They dared to send letters. They dared to meet a gaze. They dared to reach for a hand, knowing full well that such daring might earn them public penance before the week's end. You yourself, without such foolish poems, might never have held that flower, written that letter, or touched Will's hand by the egg stall. For that alone, you feel a certain gratitude toward them. Much like one feels when looking upon a painted cake. You cannot eat it, but it pleases the eye nonetheless. Yet the tragedy remains that everyone knows it is a painted cake, and still they wish for a bite. You once heard of a noblewoman so enchanted by ballads that she wrote a love letter to the castle cook, and hid it inside a roasted fish. Unfortunately, roasted fish is a poor choice for discretion. Her husband found the letter, the cook was promptly reassigned to the lowest kitchen, and the noblewoman was thereafter forbidden from listening to ballads entirely. You heard this and thought that ballads were perhaps more dangerous than they seemed. Tomorrow, the village might well choose to ban singing altogether, but then you smiled, for you knew that even if banned, someone would still sing, and even knowing it is but a painted cake, people will always wish to hear one more verse. For in a world that forbids love, forbids dreams, forbids lingering gazes, those songs remain the small crack through which the heart breathes a real breath. Tonight, you sit by the window and gaze at the moon. From somewhere beyond the walls, a wandering bard's song drifts faintly through the air. One day, the maiden and her love shall walk beneath the moon. You know well enough that in life, it is unlikely, but within you, A small part still believes, and for now, that is enough to make you smile. Chapter 16. Widows, the only real dating opportunity for women. You may already believe that in matters of love, women here are granted no rights at all. And for the most part, you would be correct, but the truth is not so absolute. There exists one group of women who almost hold rights, who almost possess freedom, who almost, in their quiet way, have the chance to date, though of course, no one would dare call it that aloud. This group, as irony would have it, is made up of the widows. In this world, the first condition for gaining the freedom to love again is a simple one on parchment. Your husband must die. Officially, certified by the church, without any plans for miraculous return. You once heard Aunt Goody declare, with a knowing look, that a woman's life moves in 3 stages: chosen, married, and if fortune favors her, widowed. At the time you laughed, but after a few years spent as a wife, you have come to understand. She was not wrong, for once a woman becomes a widow, she becomes a rare creature in the village. A woman with her own property, with the right to refuse suitors, with the ability to look at a man without first seeking her mother-in-law's permission. And of course, the price for such freedom is a funeral. Here, every right carries its fee. You saw this truth unfold with Lady Ellen. Her husband passed the year before, an old and irritable man who had long preferred the company of his chickens to that of his wife. After the funeral, Lady Ellen followed tradition. She wore black and wept for 3 days, exactly as required. But on the 4th day, she changed her scarf, and on the 5th, she walked to market in a skirt edged with floral trim. The village stirred at once. Whispers rose. "It is too soon," they said. "Only 3 days. And look, flowers." You smiled quietly, for you knew that Lady Ellen had waited 10 long years for this moment. Since then, she had become the most sought-after woman in town, not for her beauty or her youth, but for her freedom. Men watched her and thought of all that came with her new status. No need for permission, no meddling parents, no burdens of unpaid debts or troublesome livestock. Lady Ellen understood her value well. She walked through the market with measured steps, spoke with a soft and deliberate voice, and when she chose to glance at someone, she did so with precision. You once saw her glance at the blacksmith with the calm focus of someone assessing steel yet to be tempered. The blacksmith, caught in her gaze, blushed for days after. Yet even for widows, there are rules. They must not laugh too loudly, must not wear skirts that are too bright, must not style their hair too youthfully. In short, they must learn to flirt with care, with the practiced subtlety of those who know that every glance is observed. You once asked Lady Ellen whether she intended to marry again. She smiled with a knowing look and said perhaps she would, but this time she would choose more wisely. No man who loved chickens more than her. You nodded, knowing it was a lesson well worth remembering, and you had seen clearly that widows held privileges young girls did not. They could invite someone into their home without a whispered scandal. They could refuse proposals without facing accusations of improper conduct. They could love carefully, without asking permission first. And you thought, as you often do, that to hold such freedom, the price required is a funeral. The thought crossed your mind, half in jest and half in truth, that perhaps one should wish their husband good health, though perhaps not too much of it. The thought made you smile at first, then feel the weight of guilt, though you would never dare to voice such a thing aloud. Here, even stray thoughts are subject to judgment. You watched Lady Ellen continue her quiet courtship of life. One afternoon you saw her at the apple stall beside the widowed carpenter. They spoke no words, simply selected apples, their hands reaching at the same moment for the ripest fruit. The village talked for a week. They chose the same apple. The whispers said, "Surely there will be a wedding soon." You had to stifle your laughter, for here in this place, even the choice of an apple can be interpreted as a political act. But Lady Ellen was in no hurry. She understood what others did not. A second marriage is the final purchase. Choose unwisely, and there will be no third chance. And you thought to yourself that widows might be the only women here who can say no without risking public disgrace. And that, quietly, was a kind of freedom you wished for. Though not, of course, at the cost required to gain it. You returned home and looked upon your husband, seated comfortably at the table, eating well and speaking with familiar ease. You watched him for a moment, noting the steady rhythm of his breath, the contentment in his face, and you smiled. Then, as the small flicker of longing passed through you, you sighed. You know well enough that your own freedom is still far away. But you have learned one thing from watching Lady Ellen. Even if you did not choose the first time, should life ever grant you a second, you would choose more wisely. That night, as you lay back beneath your blanket and closed your eyes, you held one small hope within you, that if the day should come when you two must wear black, you will choose your apples as wisely as Lady Ellen. Chapter 17. Secrets carried through generations. You might believe that in this village, where every gaze seems able to see through 3 layers of rough cloth, there would be no space for secrets to survive. But in truth, it is precisely in such places, where tongues wag the most, that secrets are guarded the tightest. They are not kept for pride or for vanity, but simply to survive. You remember once hearing your great-grandmother say that in this village, there are 3 things one must never say aloud: one's real age, one's real debts, and one's old loves. At the time, you were too young to understand. Now you do. Very well, because you have seen how such secrets endure, tucked away in the quiet corners of houses, resting in old wooden chests, woven into the songs that the elders hum softly when they believe no one is listening. There are love stories that are never spoken aloud, but they are remembered. And sometimes, they are passed down. You once found a letter pressed inside your grandmother's old Bible, its ink faded and blurred like tears dried long ago. You asked her about it. She looked at you with a faint smile and said it was an old story, and that reading it still hurt, but not reading it would not make it disappear. You asked no more, but from that day, you understood. Even the most resigned among us keep a small corner of themselves, not for a husband, not for children, not for the village, only for themselves. And sometimes, for someone who is no longer here. You also heard the tale of great-grandmother Annie, who once loved a weaver but was forced to marry the landlord's son. The weaver vanished. She lived her life as a wife, a daughter-in-law, a mother, a grandmother, yet in her old age, whenever she wove cloth, she stitched a small letter into the corner. No one understood at the time. Only after she passed did her children learn that the weaver's name had been Arthur. It was her way of keeping love alive, thread by thread, in every stitch. You listened to this story in silence and knew that here, love must not be shown, but no one forbids loving in secret. Strangely, these secrets do not seem to embitter those who carry them. If anything, they serve as a kind of quiet spice, not meant to be consumed, but enough to keep life from turning bland. You once saw Lady Ellen, now remarried, take out a small box and gaze at it for a long time. You did not ask what it contained, for you knew well that this was a part of her no one had the right to touch, a part that perhaps helped her remain herself. You think about your own life and wonder if you already carry such a secret. And the answer is yes. A dried flower, a small scrap of paper, an old glance that lingers in memory. These are things you keep as one might guard precious salt, not for fear of discovery, but because losing them would mean losing a part of yourself. You once saw your mother, stern and busy with fields, with kitchen work, with endless laundry, sitting by the window one quiet afternoon. She held an old handkerchief, her fingers tracing its edge slowly, as though stroking a memory that had long refused to fade. You said nothing, stepping away without a word, for in that moment, you understood that even your mother, who so often warned you against dreaming, had once dreamed. And perhaps, even now, still does, generation after generation. Such secrets are carried forward. No one teaches this practice. No one writes it down. But somehow, all know it. Some things must be passed along in silence. You once heard an old woman say that old love is like a seed in the soil. One must not try to dig it up. Let it be. If it wishes, it will bloom. If not, it will enrich the earth all the same. You nodded then, knowing that you, too, are keeping such a seed. Sometimes you wonder whether we'll hold such a secret as well. A piece of a letter? A petal? A fragment of a verse? You do not know. And you do not need to know. It is enough to remember that once, for a time, two hearts touched. That is enough. There is no need to display it. No need to prove it. Only to keep it. You lie back beneath the familiar ceiling and think of the generations of women who have lived this way. Loving quietly, keeping their secrets, not from weakness, but because they understood that love is sometimes most beautiful when hidden. You smile, feeling a little lighter, and drift into sleep, and in your dreams, you carry a dried flower that has never faded. Chapter 18. Life without a dating app, but people still loved. You wake to a new day, but no new notifications greet you. There is no message asking whether you might like to match with Will. No Tinder. No Facebook. No Zallo. Nothing exists here to tell you who likes you, who does not, who may have read your letter, or who might have already blocked you. There is only the morning breeze slipping softly through the thatch, the rooster outside crowing once again off beat, and the familiar sting of a new splinter lodging itself in your foot as you rise from bed. Here, your only dating app is the village market, a place where you can look at someone for more than 2 seconds, which is the closest thing to a right swipe. If you lower your gaze, that would be a left swipe. And if you stand just a little too long holding a bundle of greens, hoping someone will pass by, well then, that is match pending, and each of these small actions is instantly broadcast to the entire village, courtesy of the widow aunt's ever-watchful eye. You think of this as you walk to the market. You see Will, standing by the onion stall. You choose onions as well. You glance toward each other. No words are exchanged, but in both your minds, a silent status appears. Someone has just come online. You cannot know for certain whether Will has swiped right. You only see the smile in his eyes. And when you smile in return, that is all the unspoken confirmation required. No app is needed to understand it, but dating without an app has its complications. You do not know whether Will is already seeing someone, whether he might have liked the girl who stood beside him at the fair yesterday, whether he knows that you once embroidered his name onto the edge of your handkerchief. There is no relationship status to check, no list of followers to study, only the all-knowing widow aunt, whose network would rival any apps. You think that if she were ever to build such a tool, she would be a wealthy woman indeed. But here, the only person approaching such status is the landlord, whose wealth consists mostly of unpaid taxes stored in 3 heavy chests. You once wondered whether love might be easier with an app. You imagine what Will's profile might look like. Occupation. Coppersmith. Interests. Carrying water. Playing music. Gazing at the moon. Looking for a kind-hearted wife, skilled in cabbage soup. The thought makes you smile. If such an app existed, you would have super liked him last year, but you also know that apps bring app drama. Before the first date, your mother would order you to unfriend him. Before the first match, your father would impose a fine. For, as he often says, no daughter of this village will seek a husband through such modern means. You sigh, and perhaps no app is better after all. At least this way, the heart still decides, not an algorithm. When you return home, your mother looks up and asks whether you saw Will at the market. You blink in surprise, and when you ask how she knew, she smirks and replies that the widow aunt has already shared the news. There is, it seems, no app that can rival Widown at 1, real-time updates, no internet required. But as you think about it, you realize something else. Even without apps, without profiles, without the constant stream of likes and comments, people still love. They still glance in secret, still tuck letters inside baskets of eggs, still leave flowers by windowsills, and most importantly, their hearts still beat. Without likes, without comments, still they beat. You smile, for you understand. Love needs no app. It only needs an excuse to stand a little closer, a reason to linger a little longer, and one small moment for your heart to beat a little faster. You think about Will once more. You do not know if he likes you, but you like not knowing. It makes each trip to the market, each visit to the well, each glance from those familiar eyes feel precious. If there were an app, you would already know who likes whom, who is chatting with whom, who has begun to ghost whom. And perhaps knowing all of that would make people stop trying. As you lie back beneath your simple ceiling, you think of the many generations before you who loved without apps, without profiles, without notifications. They had only their hearts, and that, somehow, was enough. You smile once more and think that perhaps tomorrow, you might just match with Will at the well. No one knows, but you know this much. Without apps, every small moment of love feels all the more precious, and in this world bound by so many rules, having even a little love, found in a glance, or a brief smile, is already the best software of all. Chapter 19. Things you thought were lost, but were only pretending. You have lived through enough seasons to know that the heart does not always follow the path laid before it. You have loved. You have waited. You have carried words that could not be spoken, and over time, you began to believe that certain pieces of your heart had been lost, faded beneath the weight of days that demanded silence. Yet in this world, where people so often pretend to forget simply to breathe a little easier, the truth is that many things do not vanish. They simply learn to pretend. You lie beneath the worn ceiling of your house, the moonlight slipping softly through the gaps in the thatch, and the question comes to you as it has before. Do you still love Will? The answer is slow in rising, cautious, as if testing the air before it dares speak. You understand that this love no longer lives in the warmth of a hand against yours, nor in a glance exchanged over a basket of onions, nor in the folded corner of a letter once tucked among the eggs. It has become something quieter, something folded deep within, a dried flower, resting where no one sees, no longer fresh, yet neither faded, and above all, not gone. You think of the times you told yourself to forget. You reminded yourself, again and again, that you are married now, that what once was has passed, that you are fine, but the heart listens only so far. The harder you pressed these memories down, the more firmly they settled in the spaces between days, like dust in the cracks of an old wooden floor, or moss along the stones of a forgotten well, or the image of Will's eyes that still lingers in the shadowed corners of your mind. You glance about the room. The kitchen remains as it always has. The bed waits in its quiet corner. The basket of greens rests by the window. Your husband's breath is steady, a familiar presence by the hearth. The house is clear enough to the eye. Yet you know that certain things cannot be seen. They slip through unnoticed, like cats who choose their own hidden places to sleep. There is the handkerchief folded neatly where no one looks, the dried flower pressed within the pages of a book that rarely leaves its shelf, the dreams that find their way to you on winter nights when the house has fallen silent. These are not things you speak of. Words would not unmake them. You carry them because they are yours, and because carrying them asks nothing more than quiet acceptance. You remember your great-grandmother's voice. Old love, she once said, is like a weed. Do not water it, but do not crush it either. You nodded then, not yet certain what she meant. Now you understand. It is not something you tend, nor something you seek to erase. It is something that rests, undisturbed, like a cat asleep in a basket of yarn. Perhaps one day it will stir again. Perhaps it will sleep forever. Either way, it remains. You know you are not alone in this. Your mother, too, carries such a memory. You have heard the whispers from your grandmother of a love that did not end as it should have. And even now, when an old bollard drifts through the air, you notice the slight pause in your mother's hands, the way her gaze lingers for a moment longer than the song allows. No one remarks upon it. No one needs to. The knowing is shared. You glance at your husband, sleeping soundly beside you, unaware of the thoughts that cross your mind, unaware that some small corner of your heart has never been surrendered. Yet you know he, too, may carry a name left unspoken, a glance that was never fully given voice. There is no envy in this knowledge, only understanding. For here, everyone carries something they pretend to have forgotten, not because they wish to deceive, but because pretending is the only way to live among so many watching eyes. You draw a breath and feel the shape of that truth settle quietly within you. Some things endure not because they are fed, but because they were never allowed to fade, and carrying them is not a flaw. It is a simple reminder that you are still human. Outside, the wind moves gently through the branches, a wild daisy brushes softly against the door, and as you notice it, Will's face comes to mind. Yet the thought brings no sharpness, no ache, only a breath that slows as it settles into the stillness of the night. You smile, recalling your great-grandmother's words. The things you believe to be lost are only pretending, so that you may keep walking forward, and you will walk forward, with what you have, with what remains, and with those things that, though they may pretend to be lost, are still quietly yours to hold. Chapter 20. And in the end, we still love, just a little. You have walked through many seasons. You have loved. You have lost. You have kept. You have learned when to smile because it is expected, when to remain silent because it is wise, when to look because no one forbids it, and when to dream because no one can see. You know this world well. Here, love is not exactly welcomed, nor is it fully forbidden. It is like the salt kept in the kitchen. Everyone needs it, though too much will leave you thirsty, and too little will leave life tasting flat. And like everyone else, you have learned to use just enough. Now, in the quiet of this evening, your husband breathes steadily beside you, the cat curls itself in the familiar space near your feet, and the wind moves through the wooden boards of the house, playing a melody no one ever composed. Though your eyes may close, your mind does not sleep. It wanders, unbidden, through the small places where memory lives. A market day, a glance that stayed too long, a letter once folded too carefully, a dried flower pressed between pages no one opens. And beneath all the sermons, beneath all the rules, beneath all the watching eyes that have followed you through each season, you understand now that we still love, if only a little. You think of the women who came before you, of your mother, your grandmother, your great-grandmother, of women whose names you never knew but who left behind a thread of themselves, a scrap of cloth, a pressed petal, a few faded words folded into the corners of family memory. They all loved once. It may not have lasted, it may never have been spoken, but it lived, like weeds pushing through old brick, needing no rich soil, no bright sun, just one small crack to grow. You smile faintly, remembering all the times you promised yourself that this time you would forget. But how could you, when even the lazy cat insists on curling exactly where you once hid that letter you swore you would no longer read? The heart is stubborn. It pays no heed to reason. It listens to no season of the church. It follows no priest's calendar. It moves to its own quiet rhythm. And you have come to accept that. You have seen it in others, in Lady Ellen, in your mother, and within yourself. Sometimes it takes only a glance across a crowded market, the faintest note of an old ballad carried on the wind, a stray petal beneath a basket, and the heart remembers what it was never asked to forget. Not loudly, but truly. And you wonder if perhaps this world endures not because of the rules pinned to the walls, nor the sermons intoned each week, nor the names written on public confession boards, but because of these small pieces of love we carry quietly inside, not for display, not for virtue, simply to remind ourselves that we are still human. You turn beneath the blanket, listening to the gentle sounds around you. Your husband breathes evenly, unaware of the thoughts you cradle. Somewhere you wonder whether Will remembers too. You do not know. You do not need to know. What matters is that you remember. Just enough, like salt in soup, not too much, but without it, the taste would be lost. And as you sigh, the breath carries no weight of sorrow, no reach for joy, only the lightness of wind across a late field of mustard greens. You know well that this story will not offer a happy ending for all, no swift match, no perfect words spoken in time. Yet people will still love, even when forbidden, even when watched, even when warned. And sometimes, because of all those things, they will love even more. Softer, yes, but deeper. You pull the blanket higher. Listen to the soft sound of the cat shifting, to your husband's steady breath, to the wind brushing the thatch above. And you whisper to yourself that as long as someone in this world still loves quietly, through a glance, through a breath, there will always be just enough warmth to carry it forward. And as you close your eyes, you do not dream of flowers, nor of will, nor of what was lost. You dream of a world where love no longer needs to hide. But even if it must remain hidden forever, it will still endure. And that, in the end, is enough. Wind down. And now, as the story draws near its end, as the moonlight beyond your window softens once more, and as the names, the glances, the pressed flowers return quietly to their place within the drawer of memory, you may let out a breath, gently, the way one lets go of a dream, knowing full well that a part of it will remain with you for a very long time. Because in this world, in every world, even when no promises are written, even when no profile declares the heart's condition, even when no button floats to capture it, people still love. Quietly, foolishly, beautifully, humanly, and so do you. And that, truly, is enough. Now, whether you are still awake, or already drifting somewhere between breath and sleep, let the final images settle softly and fade. The dried flower within the old book, the familiar gaze across the market, and all the things you once thought were lost, but were only pretending to be. If this story has spoken to you, if some small part of it felt true, you are welcome to leave a quiet comment. Perhaps tell me where you are listening from, and what time it is, there in the dark where you rest. And if you would like to stay with me a little longer, through these small stories, these brittle fragments of memory, these strange corners of forgotten history, you are welcome to subscribe. Gently, with no pressure, the way love should be. When the moment feels right, you will choose it on your own. So now, close your eyes. Let the dream come, light as a feather. Let it carry you through another night. And perhaps, when tomorrow arrives, you will smile, remembering that no matter how many rules the world may carry, people still love. Sleep well, and I will see you again. Good night.